The judge said the will left me nothing. My father smiled. My brother, Nolan, folded his hands like he had already won. I stood at the lectern, folder pressed to my chest, and waited until the room settled. Then I said, "You missed the box." Every head in the probate courtroom turned toward me. Dad's smile slipped. Nolan blinked. Judge Mercer looked up from the papers and asked me to continue. That was the moment the room changed. But to understand why I was so calm, you have to know how I ended up here, listening to men who had barely visited my grandfather in years explain why I deserved nothing. My name is Claire Harlan. I was 62 when my grandfather died. I had spent 34 years teaching English in Dayton, living on a modest salary and measuring success by the students who came back to visit. My father, Brent, thought that made me sentimental. He favored Nolan, a polished contractor with a loud laugh and an expensive watch. At family dinners, Dad talked business with him and treated me like an afterthought. The person who made that bearable was my grandfather, Walter Harlan. He was a Korean War veteran, a dairy farmer, and the gentlest man I knew. After my grandmother died, he grew quieter. My father's visits grew shorter every year. Nolan came only when there was something to discuss: land, taxes, accounts, future planning. I came every Tuesday after work. I brought groceries, sorted pills, fixed the printer, and sat at his kitchen table while he drank coffee and told me stories. One night, when he was already frail, he looked up from his mug and said, "People show their real face when they think you're no longer useful." I asked what he meant. He only smiled and changed the subject. The last year of his life was hard. His knees gave out, his vision blurred, and he fell in the barn one icy February morning. I rode in the ambulance with him. I stayed through rehab, wrote down instructions from doctors, and learned the names of medications nobody else bothered to remember. A nurse once told me, "He speaks about you like you're the only steady thing in his world." About 6 months before he died, he pressed a small brass key into my hand. "If it matters," he said, "you'll know where to use it." I slipped it into my purse and forgot it for a while. When he passed away in his sleep, the grief arrived like weather, sudden and heavy. The funeral filled the church with neighbors and townspeople. I thought that would be the end of my hardest week. I was wrong. The minute the service ended, Brent and Nolan began talking to lawyers. Within days, I was sitting in probate court while their attorney declared that the will was clear and I received nothing. So I opened my folder. Inside were papers from a locked metal box hidden in the workshop, the one the brass key had opened. Walter had left letters, financial records, and a separate trust prepared by an independent estate lawyer named Evelyn Shaw. Judge Mercer read for a long time without speaking. Then he asked, "Did your grandfather have private counsel?" "Yes," I said, "and he kept records." The courtroom went still as the judge discovered the trust. It had been funded years earlier, and it controlled most of the property outside probate. There were notes from meetings, signed acknowledgments, and a letter in Walter's own handwriting saying he feared being treated like a wallet instead of a father. I had to look down when the judge read that line aloud. The examination took weeks. Bank records were reviewed, caregivers were interviewed. One by one, the pieces fit together. Walter had understood that certain accounts and land transfers were being handled without full transparency, and he had protected himself long before anyone else took him seriously. The trust was upheld. My father and brother received less than they expected, and a large share went to local charities and education funds Walter had chosen himself. The rest came to me, not as a reward, but as proof that he trusted me to carry his wishes forward. I did not feel triumphant. I felt the ache of being loved clearly and too late to say thank you. Months later, I used the land to support small farms, instead of selling it to developers. I created scholarships for students who wanted to become teachers and librarians. Nolan eventually called to apologize. Brent never quite did, though his voice softened over time. And one evening, while sorting the last of Walter's things, I found a note in his handwriting. It said, "The greatest inheritance is not property. It is knowing who you are when the property is gone." I keep that note in my desk now. Whenever I think of the courtroom, I remember the key, the box, the silence before the truth spoke, and the man who loved me enough to prepare for the worst and for the best.